No one came to the billionaire's birthday. Then a Maid's Toddler's dad did the unthinkable. Ethan Cole stood in the middle of his enormous dining hall, staring at a table set for 50 people. The candles were lit. The champagne was chilled. A 3-tier cake sat untouched in the center, with "Happy 34th Birthday, Ethan" written in gold icing. Nobody was there. It was already 8:30. The invitations had gone out 2 weeks ago. His business partners, his so-called friends from college, even his own sister had confirmed they would come. Now his phone showed nothing but silence. No calls. No texts. Not even an excuse. Ethan sat down at the head of the table, alone, in a house so large that his own footsteps echoed when he walked. He was one of the richest men in the country. His company, Colvale Technologies, had made headlines for 3 years straight. He had everything money could buy. And yet, on the one night he actually needed someone to show up, not one person did. He didn't understand it yet, but something had changed that week. A rumor had started spreading through his industry. A rumor that his company was quietly failing, that his stock was about to crash, that he was drowning in debt he could not pay back. None of it was true. But people believed what was convenient, and the moment his so-called friends heard the whispers, they disappeared like smoke. In the kitchen, a woman named Maria Alvarez was finishing the last of the catering trays. She had worked as Ethan's housekeeper for almost 2 years. She was quiet, hardworking, and always arrived early. Tonight she had stayed late to help set up the party, bringing her 3-year-old daughter Sophia with her because she had no one else to watch the little girl. Sophia was small for her age, with dark curly hair and a gap-toothed smile. She had been sitting quietly on a stool in the kitchen, drawing with crayons on the back of a napkin, when she noticed something through the doorway. "Mama," she whispered, tugging on Maria's apron. "Why is the man sitting all alone?" Maria peeked around the corner. Her heart sank when she saw Ethan sitting at the enormous table by himself, staring at the cake like it was a stranger's face. She had heard the guests were supposed to arrive hours ago. Not a single car had pulled into the driveway all night. "He's just resting, Mija," Maria said softly, though she knew that wasn't the truth. But Sophia had already slipped off the stool before her mother could stop her. She toddled across the marble floor in her little pink sneakers, her napkin drawing clutched tightly in one hand. Ethan didn't notice her at first. He was lost in his own thoughts, replaying every phone call he had made that week, every person who had once called him family or friend. When he finally looked down, he found a tiny girl standing beside his chair, staring up at him with wide brown eyes. "Hi," Sophia said simply. Ethan blinked, caught off guard. "Hi there. Where's your mommy?" Sophia pointed toward the kitchen. Then she held up her napkin drawing, a scribble of yellow and orange lines that was supposed to be, as she proudly announced, a birthday cake with 100 candles. "For you," she said. "Happy birthday." For a moment, Ethan didn't know what to say. He had received expensive watches, private jet vouchers, and handwritten cards from senators that week. None of them had touched him the way this crumpled napkin did. Maria rushed out from the kitchen, apologizing frantically. "I'm so sorry, sir, she doesn't usually bother guests, I'll take her right." "It's all right," Ethan said, his voice quieter than usual. "She's not bothering me." He looked at the drawing again, then at the little girl who was now trying to climb onto the chair beside him without any hesitation, as if being near a billionaire in an empty mansion was the most normal thing in the world. "Can I sit with you?" Sophia asked. Maria opened her mouth to object, but something in Ethan's expression stopped her. He looked, for the first time in weeks, like a man who wasn't performing for anyone. Just tired. Just human. "Sure," he said, lifting Sophia up onto the chair beside him. "Actually, would you like a piece of that cake? Nobody else seems to want it." Sophia's eyes lit up. "Really? Really? It would be a shame to waste it." As Maria watched her daughter and her employer share a slice of an untouched birthday cake in an echoing dining hall, she felt something twist in her chest. She had seen wealthy men before. Some were cruel, some were careless. Most simply didn't notice people like her at all. But there was something different in the way Ethan looked at Sophia. Something lonely and searching, like a man who had built an empire and forgotten to build a life inside of it. What none of them knew that night was that this small, unplanned moment, a toddler's napkin drawing and a stranger's kindness, was about to set something much bigger into motion. Because 2 miles away, Maria's husband, Daniel, had just opened an email that would change everything. And what Daniel was about to do would shake Ethan's entire world, not because of money, but because of something far more rare. The truth. Daniel Alvarez had once been someone important, though almost nobody in his current life knew it. Before a training accident left him with a permanent limp and forced him out of active duty, he had spent 6 years working in military intelligence, specializing in financial fraud investigations tied to national security. He had a mind built for spotting patterns other people missed. These days, he fixed air conditioners and patched up leaky roofs for a small handyman business he had started after leaving the service. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, and it let him be home for Sophia's bedtime most nights. He never talked about his old job. Not because he was ashamed, but because that life felt like it belonged to someone else now. That night, while Maria was working late at the Cole mansion, Daniel was sitting at their kitchen table, fixing the family laptop, which had been running slow for weeks. While clearing out old files, he stumbled across something strange. A folder had been quietly created on their shared home network, one he didn't recognize, filled with financial documents that had nothing to do with his business. At first he thought it was a mistake, maybe a virus or something Maria had accidentally downloaded. But the deeper he looked, the more his old training kicked in. These weren't random files. They were internal spreadsheets, projections, and email chains from a company called Vantrix Capital. And the person named again and again throughout the documents was Richard Voss, Ethan Cole's business partner and closest advisor. Daniel read for almost 2 hours straight, his coffee going cold beside him. What he found made his stomach turn. Richard Voss had been secretly manipulating Colvale Technologies' internal reports for months, leaking false information to select investors and media contacts, making it look like the company was on the verge of collapse. It wasn't true. In reality, Colvale was financially strong. But Richard had spent weeks quietly buying up shares at panic prices through a shell company, planning to seize controlling interest the moment enough people believed the rumors and sold out of fear. The plan was almost complete. Richard needed just one more thing to finish the takeover. A public embarrassment, something that would make Ethan look weak and abandoned, so the board would lose confidence in him entirely. That was why Richard had quietly convinced Ethan's so-called friends, his business circle, even his own sister, not to attend his birthday party that night. A calculated, cruel move designed to make one man feel utterly alone at the exact moment his empire was being stolen from him. Daniel sat back in his chair, stunned. He didn't know Ethan Cole personally. He had only heard Maria talk about him a handful of times, usually saying he seemed lonely despite all his money. But what Daniel was looking at wasn't just corporate scheming. It was a deliberate attack on someone's dignity, someone's life, planned by a man Ethan trusted completely. He thought about calling the police, but he had no real proof that would hold up, not yet, and no one would believe a random handyman over a respected investment executive. He thought about staying quiet, minding his own business the way most people would. It wasn't his fight. He had a family to protect, a small business to run, and getting involved in billionaire drama sounded like the fastest way to lose everything he had built for Sophia. But then he thought about his daughter, sitting right now in the home of a man who was probably alone in a giant house, surrounded by people who had turned their backs on him for money. Daniel knew what it felt like to be betrayed by people you trusted. He had experienced it in the military, watching commanding officers protect their own reputations while soldiers under them paid the price. He had promised himself he would never stay silent again if he could help it. He picked up his phone and called Maria. "Is everything okay?" she asked, hearing the tension in his voice. "I need you to trust me on something," Daniel said slowly. "Is Mr. Cole still there? Is he alone?" "Yes, why?" Daniel looked at the folder still open on his screen, at proof of one of the biggest betrayals he had ever seen outside of a battlefield. "Because I think I know why nobody showed up tonight," he said. "And I think I can prove it." Maria fell silent on the other end of the line. She glanced through the kitchen doorway, where Ethan was still sitting with Sophia, letting the little girl show him how to properly frost a piece of cake with her tiny plastic fork, both of them laughing quietly in a room that had been empty of joy just an hour earlier. "Come here," Maria whispered into the phone. "Come here now." Daniel grabbed his old military laptop bag, the one he hadn't opened in over a year, and printed every document he could. His hands were steady, but his heart pounded the way it used to before a mission briefing. He didn't know Ethan Cole. He didn't owe him anything. But somewhere out there, a little girl had just given a lonely man a piece of birthday cake, and Daniel Alvarez had decided that some things mattered more than staying out of trouble. Tonight he was going to do the unthinkable. The gates of the Cole estate had never seen a beat-up gray pickup truck before. Daniel pulled up just past 10 at night, his laptop bag on the passenger seat, his heart hammering harder than it had in years. The security guard at the gate eyed him skeptically until Maria came rushing out to vouch for him. "He's my husband," she said breathlessly. "Please, it's important. It's about Mr. Cole." The guard, an older man named Frank who had grown fond of Maria over the past 2 years, hesitated only a moment before waving Daniel through. Inside, Ethan was still sitting at the table with Sophia, who had fallen asleep against his arm, her small hand still clutching a half-eaten piece of cake. He looked up when Maria walked in, followed closely by a tall man with a slight limp and a serious expression. "Mr. Cole, I'm sorry to intrude," Daniel said, setting his bag down carefully so he wouldn't wake Sophia. "My name is Daniel Alvarez. I'm Maria's husband. I found something tonight that I think you need to see." Ethan raised an eyebrow, exhaustion evident on his face. "Mr. Alvarez, I appreciate you coming, but if this is about a repair invoice, I really don't have the energy right now." "It's not about that," Daniel said firmly. "It's about why nobody came to your birthday tonight." That got Ethan's attention immediately. He gently shifted Sophia into a more comfortable position against a cushion and stood up, his tiredness replaced by something sharper. "What do you mean?" Daniel pulled out the printed documents and spread them across the long dining table, next to the abandoned birthday cake. He explained everything: the shell company, the false reports, the deliberate campaign to make Ethan look unstable and abandoned right before a hostile takeover. He explained how Richard Voss had spent months manipulating the narrative, quietly buying shares while convincing Ethan's closest circle, through carefully placed rumors and half-truths, that Ethan's company and reputation were both crumbling. Ethan's face went pale as he read through the documents. Financial records, emails, internal communications between Richard and executives at Vantrix Capital, discussing timelines and target dates that lined up exactly with tonight's failed party. "This can't be right," Ethan muttered, though even as he said it, pieces began falling into place. The strange phone calls from board members over the past month. His sister's sudden coldness after a private conversation with Richard. The unusual silence from investors who normally called him constantly. "I know this is a lot to take in," Daniel said. "And I know you don't know me from anyone. I used to work in financial fraud investigation before I got hurt and left the service. I'm not looking for anything from you, Mr. Cole. I just couldn't sit on this once I found it. Not after seeing my daughter sitting in your kitchen tonight, talking about the nice man who was all alone." Ethan looked over at Sophia, still sleeping peacefully, unaware that her small act of kindness with a napkin drawing had somehow led to this moment. He looked back at Daniel, a man in worn work clothes who had no reason to get involved in a billionaire's problems, no reason to risk anything for a stranger. "Why would you do this?" Ethan asked quietly. "You don't know me. You have nothing to gain." Daniel shrugged, a simple, honest gesture. "Because somebody has to stand up when they see something wrong, even when it's not their fight. Especially then. I learned that the hard way once, and I promised myself I wouldn't look away again." For the first time all night, Ethan felt something shift inside his chest, something he hadn't felt in years. Not the calculated respect of a business deal, not the polished flattery of investors, but genuine, unguarded honesty from someone who owed him absolutely nothing. "I need to verify this," Ethan said, gathering the documents carefully. "But if what you're showing me is true, Richard has been planning to destroy everything I built, using my own birthday as a weapon against me." "It's true," Daniel said. "I checked every source twice before I came here." Ethan sat back down slowly, the weight of the night crashing over him in a new way. Not just the loneliness of an empty party, but the horrifying realization that it had never been an accident at all. It had been engineered by someone he trusted completely. Maria stepped forward gently. "Mr. Cole, I know this is overwhelming, but you're not alone tonight." "Not really." Ethan looked at the small family standing in his dining room, a housekeeper, her handyman husband, and their sleeping daughter. None of them wealthy, none of them powerful in the way his old circle had been, and yet they had shown him more loyalty in one evening than his entire social world had in years. "I don't know how to repay this," Ethan said quietly. Daniel shook his head. "You don't owe me anything. But if you want my advice, don't wait until morning to move on this. Richard is expecting you broken and desperate tomorrow. Don't give him that." Ethan looked down at the documents again, then at his phone, which had been silent all night. A slow, determined fire began building behind his eyes, the same fire that had once built an empire from nothing. "Then let's make sure he doesn't get what he's expecting," Ethan said. By midnight, the mansion that had been silent and empty just hours earlier was alive with quiet, focused energy. Ethan had called his general counsel, his chief financial officer, and 2 board members he still trusted, all of them stunned awake by the news but immediately mobilizing once they saw the evidence Daniel had gathered. Daniel stayed the entire night, walking Ethan's legal team through exactly how he had found the files, how the fraudulent trail connected back to Richard Voss and Vantrix Capital. His military background and financial intelligence proved invaluable, helping the lawyers understand which documents would hold up as evidence and which needed further verification before morning. Maria made pot after pot of coffee, staying close to Sophia, who slept soundly on a couch nearby, wrapped in a blanket someone had found for her. Despite the tension in the room, there was something different about the mansion that night. It didn't feel cold and empty anymore. It felt, for the first time in a long while, like a place where people actually cared about what happened to each other. Around 3 in the morning, Ethan pulled Daniel aside into a quiet hallway. "I looked into your background while the lawyers were working," Ethan admitted. 6 years of exceptional service. Multiple commendations. You could have gone into private financial security work after you left, made real money with the skills you have. Why didn't you? Daniel leaned against the wall, tired but calm. "After my injury, I needed something simple, something honest. Fixing things people can see and touch, that felt more real to me than chasing numbers on a screen. I don't regret it. But tonight you used exactly those old skills to help a complete stranger," Ethan said. "Some things you don't forget how to do," Daniel replied. "And some things matter more than staying comfortable." Ethan was quiet for a moment, studying the man in front of him. "My whole life, I've surrounded myself with people who were impressed by what I had. Money, status, influence. Not one of them has ever done something like this for me, expecting nothing back. "Maybe that's the real problem," Daniel said gently. "You built an empire, Mr. Cole, but empires can be lonely places if the only people inside them are looking for what they can take." The words landed heavily, and Ethan found himself nodding slowly, thinking about years of transactional friendships, family relationships built more on obligation than love, an entire adult life spent accumulating wealth while quietly starving for something real. By 6 a.m, Ethan's legal team had compiled enough verified evidence to move forward. They contacted federal regulators about the securities fraud, filed emergency injunctions to freeze Richard's shell company assets, and prepared a public statement exposing the manipulation before Richard could make his final move. At 8 o'clock, Richard Voss arrived at the office expecting to find a broken, desperate Ethan Cole ready to hand over control. Instead, he was met by federal investigators, Ethan's full legal team, and Ethan himself standing tall, holding printed evidence of every fraudulent transaction Richard had orchestrated. "You planned all of this," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the exhaustion in his eyes. "My birthday, my isolation, all of it, just to make me look weak enough to lose everything I built." Richard's confident expression crumbled as he realized his plan had completely unraveled overnight. "Ethan, I can explain. Save it for the investigators," Ethan said simply, turning and walking away. Within days, the story broke publicly, not as a tale of a billionaire's failing company, but as a story of corporate betrayal exposed just in time by an unlikely source. News outlets picked up the story quickly, fascinated by the twist. It wasn't lawyers or financial experts who had uncovered the scheme first. It was a handyman, a former military investigator who now fixed air conditioners for a living, married to a housekeeper, father to a 3-year-old girl who had innocently walked up to a lonely man at his own birthday party and offered him a piece of cake. Reporters swarmed for interviews, eager to learn more about the mysterious family behind the exposed fraud. But Daniel politely declined most of them, wanting to protect his family's privacy and return to his normal life. He had done what felt right, not for recognition but because it was the right thing to do. Still, one thing had changed permanently. The connection between two families who never should have crossed paths, brought together by a napkin drawing and a stubborn refusal to look away from injustice, had become something neither of them expected. 6 months later, the Cole estate looked different. Not in its size or grandeur but in the way it felt. The dining hall that had once echoed with silence now regularly filled with laughter. Mismatched furniture from a cozy living room addition Ethan had built specifically so Sophia would have somewhere comfortable to play crayons and watch cartoons while her parents worked nearby. Ethan had recovered his company fully after Richard's fraud was exposed. Colvale Technologies emerged even stronger, with a renewed public image built on transparency and integrity rather than flashy headlines. But more importantly, Ethan himself had changed. He had quietly ended almost every relationship built on convenience and status. His sister, embarrassed by her role in avoiding the party, eventually reached out to reconcile, and Ethan gave her a real chance, though he no longer measured relationships by attendance at galas or public appearances. He measured them by moments like the ones he now shared regularly with the Alvarez family. Daniel had been offered, and eventually accepted, a position heading internal security and fraud prevention for Colvale Technologies, using his old skills in a way that finally felt meaningful again. He still fixed things around the house on weekends, joking that he couldn't fully give up his tools, but for the first time in years, he felt like he was using every part of who he was, the soldier, the investigator, and the father. Maria continued working at the estate, though her role had shifted significantly. She now managed the household staff and helped coordinate charitable events Ethan had started hosting, ones focused on supporting military families and underprivileged children, inspired directly by the family that had changed his life. And Sophia, now closer to 4 years old, had become something of a permanent fixture in Ethan's world. Every evening when he came home from work, she would run up to him with a new drawing, sometimes of cakes, sometimes of dogs, sometimes of their entire family, as she liked to call the group of them. One evening, nearly a year after that lonely birthday, Ethan stood in his backyard watching Sophia chase fireflies while Daniel grilled burgers and Maria set the outdoor table with far less formality than the untouched feast from his 34th birthday party. There were no 50 empty chairs this time. Just a small group of people who genuinely wanted to be there. "Penny for your thoughts?" Daniel asked, handing Ethan a drink. Ethan smiled, watching Sophia giggle as she cupped her hands around a firefly. "I was just thinking about how strange life is. A year ago I thought having everything meant surrounding myself with successful, important people. Turns out I had it backwards the whole time." Daniel nodded, understanding completely. Sometimes the people with the least to gain are the ones who show up the most. "You didn't have to get involved that night," Ethan said. "You could have stayed home, minded your own business, let things play out however they were going to play out." "I know," Daniel admitted. "But some nights you look at your daughter, and you realize you want her growing up believing that doing the right thing matters more than staying safe and comfortable. I couldn't teach her that lesson by staying silent." Across the yard, Sophia came running up, breathless and excited. "Uncle Ethan, I caught one. Look." She opened her tiny hands just enough to reveal a small firefly glowing softly inside. Ethan crouched down to her level, marveling at the simple wonder on her face, a wonder that had somehow, against all odds, changed the entire direction of his life. "That's amazing, Sophia," he said gently. "You know, a year ago on my birthday, you gave me the best gift anyone's ever given me." Sophia tilted her head curiously. "A cake drawing." Ethan laughed softly, his eyes a little misty. "No. You reminded me what it feels like to not be alone." Sophia, satisfied with this answer even though she barely understood it, opened her hands and let the firefly float gently back into the night sky, its tiny light disappearing among 100 others. Behind them, Maria called everyone to dinner, and as the small, unlikely family gathered around a modest table under the stars, Ethan Cole realized something he had never truly understood in all his years of building an empire. Sometimes the most unthinkable acts of kindness don't come from grand gestures or powerful people. Sometimes they come from a handyman's quiet courage, a housekeeper's steady kindness, and a toddler's simple, innocent act of offering someone a piece of birthday cake. And sometimes, that's exactly what saves a person's entire life.